Well, I guess very similar to you, Dee, with your story as to how you're campaigning about for one punch assaults. For me, it was a personal tragedy that got me working on alcohol harm because just over 7 years ago, I got the knock on the door by the police to tell me that my brother had died. It turned out that he had been suffering from alcohol addiction. He'd been in hospital to try to overcome some of that. But it turned out that actually, when you try to deal with addiction, you also need to deal with the mental health side of it. And unfortunately, it was only trying to tackle one of those. So he tragically died in a car crash whilst over the limit. And I think really, from my perspective, it was to make sure that no one else goes through what me and my family did do, because it did tear the heart out of the family, really.
And so you're campaigning on alcohol harms at the moment. Tell us a little bit about how that's going.
So I first mentioned it in the Commons Chamber, about 2 years ago now, essentially asking for an alcohol strategy. And 2 years later, we still don't have one. When we're talking about addiction, no one chooses to be an addict. But what we've seen in the last couple of years is a 20% increase in alcohol-related deaths, an 11% increase in deaths from mental disorders due to alcohol, and a 15% increase in deaths due to fatal alcohol poisoning. So if anything, the country's going backwards. But we're seeing people's drinking behaviours have certainly changed during the COVID pandemic. And like I said, no one chooses to be an addict, but what we're asking for isn't a huge change. We're asking for more information on alcohol labels so that people can be truly informed about what they're consuming. Ideally, a change to the Equality Act so that there can be employment support for those people who are suffering from addiction. I mean, if you were a cancer patient, you'd be allowed time out to go for your chemo or radiotherapy sessions. So, surely there should be something to help you if you need to go to rehab or to any sort of treatment services. But at the moment, that's lacking because there is a memorandum of exclusion in the Equality Act because addiction is still seen as a personal choice. So I think really it's about trying to inform as many people as possible. I mean, I'm certainly not trying to preach abstinence or temperance. It's just about making sure there's as much information out there for all consumers as possible, really.